Okay, First Kings chapter 18. This is a fun chapter. This is one of my favorite stories of Elijah, basically. Some really cool stuff as he confronts the priests of Baal. So he's going to talk to Ahab, the king of Israel. Remember, Ahab has basically doubled down on everybody else's doubling down on being more wicked than everybody else. So he has severely established idolatry. They have such an organized religion for a false religion that it's amazing. And Elijah is going to directly confront this today. And we're going to see some powerful miracles and stories here. So let's jump in. Verse 1, and it came to pass after many days that the word of the Lord came to Elijah in the third year, saying, Go, show thyself unto Ahab, and I will send rain upon the earth. So he's going to go do this. So this has been a 3-year drought. That is a long time without rain. Verse 2, and Elijah went to show himself unto Ahab, and there was a sore famine in Samaria. So this whole area was just terrible famine. Lots of problems that were going on, basically. Verse 3, and Ahab called Obadiah, which was the governor of his house. Now Obadiah feared the Lord greatly, basically. So Obadiah was a kind of a second in command or a governor to help Ahab out, basically. And he probably wasn't too excited to see Elijah there, was really hoping to correct things and help get people get out of this famine by doing what's right. Verse 4, for it was so when Jezebel cut off the prophets of the Lord that Obadiah took 100 prophets and hid them by 50 in a cave and fed them with bread and water. So if we go back 2 chapters, we learn about in 1 Kings 16, we learn about this, where actually Ahab, remember, marries Jezebel. That's what we learn about in there. So Jezebel is a worshiper of Baal, remember? And so this is, we learn kind of in the background that Jezebel basically tried to destroy all the prophets, the true teachers. So there have been prophets during this time trying to tell the people basically that this false religion that Ahab and Jeroboam and them have put in place is bad. Jezebel tried to kill them all and get rid of them, and Obadiah hid the prophets and helped out. So he's more willing to be a believer of God and things here and help out. Verse 5, and Ahab said unto Obadiah, Go into the land unto all fountains of water and unto all brooks. Peradventure we may find grass to save the horses and mules alive, that we lose not all the beasts. So he's saying, Obadiah, you've got to go find if there's any grass growing, by a spring, or there's been some water, residual water somewhere. You need to find it and bring it back so we can feed our animals. We're losing our animals, the horses and the mules, which means they are our pack animals. They are our animals for war. They help us haul stuff. They're industrial. So this is going to cause major economic problems for them and slow production of all kinds of things down if they all die, basically. He probably gets around on a horse, so he doesn't have to walk very far. He just rides a horse everywhere. So verse 6, so they divided the land between them to pass through it. Ahab went one way by himself, and Obadiah went another way by himself. So they're going out to try to find water, basically, and find food for their animals. Verse 7, and as Obadiah was in the way, behold, Elijah met him. And he knew him and fell on his face and said, Art thou that my lord Elijah? So Obadiah knows who Elijah is. And he answered, I am. Go tell thy Lord, behold, Elijah is here. And he said, What have I sinned that thou wouldest deliver thy servant into the hand of Ahab to slay me? So Obadiah is a little concerned. So Obadiah knows who Elijah is and that he is a true prophet. But Obadiah knows if he goes back to Ahab and says, Hey, Ahab, I found Elijah and he's here to talk to you, Obadiah is going to die. That's kind of that don't shoot the messenger, but Obadiah is going to die because he brought Elijah, one of these other prophets that teach against Ahab. Remember, Elijah talked with him 3 years earlier and started the famine. So Elijah is not welcome. And that's probably why Jezebel killed a lot of the prophets, is to try to kill them and slay them, hoping that if we eliminate them, that the famine will go away. But they couldn't find Elijah, and now Elijah's going to Ahab again. Verse 10, as the Lord thy God liveth, there is no nation or kingdom where my Lord hath not sent to seek thee. And when they said, he is not here, he took an oath of the kingdom and nation that they found thee not. And now thou sayest, go tell thy Lord, behold, Elijah is here. So that verse 10 is kind of what we talked about. Ahab sent to find Elijah, and Elijah was not there. No one knew where Elijah went. And they killed the rest of the prophets trying to find Elijah and trying to get rid of this curse of famine. And it wasn't going up. And I'm sure they did all kinds of worshiping to Baal and Ashtaroth and others to lift the curse, but it never got lifted. So that's when Obadiah's like, wait, we spent years looking for you, hunting you down. No one could find you. And now you suddenly show up and you want me to introduce you to the king? I'm going to lose my life. I'm going to lose my, everything if I introduce you. I'm a little scared about this. Verse 12, and this is Elijah speaking, and it shall come to pass as soon as I am gone from thee, that the Spirit of the Lord shall carry thee whither I know not. And so when I come and tell Ahab, and he cannot find thee, he shall slay me. But I, thy servant, fear the Lord from my youth. Oh, sorry, this is, let's see, verse 13. Was it not told, my Lord, what I did when Jezebel slew the prophets of the Lord? So this is actually Obadiah speaking, excuse me. He says that it come to pass that as soon as I'm gone from thee, basically, so as soon as I deliver you to Ahab and then leave, that the Spirit's going to carry you somewhere else, and you're going to be free and safe. But I am going to be, I've been a true believer, if you will, a fear of the Lord from my youth. I've been raised in the right ways and want to keep the right ways, which is interesting that he's part of the kingdom of Israel and didn't go back to the kingdom of Judah, because Judah, Asa, has been trying to restore those original ways, remember. But he says basically, you're going to leave. The Spirit's going to carry you off, but I'm going to be left behind, and I'm going to get killed because of it. Verse 13, was it not told, my Lord, what I did when Jezebel slew the prophets of the Lord, how I hid 100 men of the Lord's prophets by 50 in a cave, and fed them with bread and water? And now thou sayest, go tell thy Lord, behold, Elijah is here, and he shall slay me. So this is, Obadiah's worried. He's like, I'm going to die. This is not a good thing. So Elijah says, verse 15, and Elijah said, as the Lord of hosts liveth, before whom I stand, I will surely show myself unto him today. So Elijah's like, dude, I'm here to do the Lord's will. We're going to talk to Ahab today, whether you come or not. Verse 16, so Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. Verse 17, and it came to pass when Ahab saw Elijah, that Ahab said unto him, art thou he that troubleth Israel? And he answered, I have not troubled Israel, but thou and thy father's house, in that ye have forsaken the commandments of the Lord, and thou hast followed Baalim, or Baal, basically. Now this is an important thing, because Ahab's going to Elijah going, aren't you the guy that's ruined Israel? You're like the enemy, the treasonous person here. And Elijah's like, I'm not the one that's treasonous. You're the one that has gone away from God, basically. So perspective makes a difference. We've learned this with Saul and with David and other of the previous kings in the book of Samuel, that perspective makes a difference. Who's right and who's wrong? We have to understand these. So when in trying to understand perspective, we need to make sure that we take the time to understand both perspectives. And then we seek the Spirit to help us understand which one's the true perspective, which means we have to be willing to admit we might be wrong. Our perspective might be the wrong one, and we need to improve and be better at that. So perspective is what's going on here. From Ahab's perspective, Elijah is the troublemaker. From Elijah's perspective, Ahab is the one at fault because he's not keeping the commandments. And verse 19, now therefore send and gather to me all Israel unto Mount Carmel. This is Elijah saying this. And the prophets of Baal, 450. And the prophets of the groves, 400, which eat at Jezebel's tables. Remember, the groves, this is the worshippers of Ashtaroth, the fertility rites, the crazy sexual acts and child sacrifices and other stuff that sometimes they do. So he's saying, gather all Israel together. We're going to have a battle of the perspectives, basically, is what's going to happen here. This is pretty crazy. Verse 20, so Ahab sent unto all the children of Israel and gathered the prophets together unto Mount Carmel. So they're pulling everyone together basically to have a showdown of these two perspectives. Who's right? Is Ahab right or is Elijah right? This is definitely not the best way to do things, to have these showdowns, but in the situation where they're in, it was probably something that God was telling Elijah, here's what you need to go do. Because these guys are so wicked, they've gone so far, they need very unequivocally clear examples and signs that they're wrong. So, verse 21, and Elijah came unto all the people and said, how long halt ye between two opinions? Remember, this is that war of perspectives. If the Lord be God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him. And the people answered him not a word. So this is, Elijah's coming to him going, people, look, this is the problem. You guys are following Baal, but you know that's not the God of Israel. If the God of Israel is the true God, then you should be following him. If Baal is a true God, then you should be following him. You need to make a decision here. There's these two perspectives that are going on. That's what's happening here. And the people are confused. They don't quite know what to do, basically. Verse 22, then Elijah said unto the people, I, even I only, remain a prophet of the Lord, but Baal's prophets are 450 men. So he's saying, I follow the God of Israel. And he's got 450 men over here following Baal. That doesn't necessarily mean one's greater than the other just because he has more people on his side. Popularity doesn't mean truth. Very important point. Popularity, just because everybody else is doing it, doesn't mean it's right or true. Okay? Elijah's doing things by himself, but he is representing the true God. 23, let them therefore give us 2 bullocks, and let them choose 1 bullock for themselves, and cut it in pieces, and lay it on wood, and put no fire under, and I will dress the other bullock, and lay it on wood, and put no fire under. This is the test. You guys go build a wooden altar, basically build up some wood so you can have a fire. Bring 2 bullocks. You guys choose which one you want. I'll take the other one. You take your animal, you cut it up for the ritual cuts and sacrifice, you put it on the altar, and then you're going to pray to your God to bring the fire down. You can't bring your own fire. God has to provide the fire, basically. Verse 24, and call ye on the name of your gods, and I will call on the name of the Lord. And the God that answereth by fire, let him be God. And all people answered and said, it is well spoken. So everybody's going, oh, okay, this makes sense. This makes sense. This should be okay. That sounds right. That sounds reasonable. You know, we have this debate between who's the real God, basically, who's the right prophet to follow, which has been the debate since the time of Solomon, basically, when after Jeroboam and Rehoboam and all that, they've had this debate ever since then. Who's the truth? Okay, and both of them have been wicked for a while. Then Asa became the righteous king of Judah, remember, and he lived 30-something years and reigned. He's kind of gone through all of these kings of Israel that have gone worse and worse and worse. And now Elijah's here to finally bring this to an answer, to say, look, we're going to answer this question right here. You guys have fought and argued over this for decades. We're going to answer it right now. So we're going to build this up, and you pray and have your God consume the altar. God sends the fire. Whichever God sends the fire is the God that you all need to worship, basically. And everybody's like, oh, okay, that sounds reasonable. That makes sense. Verse 25, and Elijah said unto the prophets of Baal, choose you 1 bullock for yourselves, and dress it first. For ye are many, and call on the name of your gods, but put no fire under. So he let them go first, basically. Verse 26, they took the bullock which was given them, they dressed it, and called on the name of Baal from morning until noon, saying, O Baal, hear us. But there was no voice, nor any that answered. And they leaped upon the altar which was made. And it came to pass, and so they're trying all kinds of things to get their God to be real, to actually do something for them, basically. They're leaping on the altar. They're probably, bemoaning and saying chants and all kinds of stuff to make a spectacle of this, hoping to get something to happen. And it's not. maybe even leaping on the altar. They're hoping that a spark hits maybe and starts up or something on its own, trying to kind of, here, God, we're going to help you along this process. We're going to make it easier for you to be God. And it's not working. Verse 27, and it came to pass at noon that Elijah mocked them and said, cry aloud, for he is a God. Either he is talking, or he is pursuing, or he is in a journey, or peradventure he sleepeth and must be awaked. So he's kind of making fun of them, going, oh, if you're, maybe you need to yell louder. Maybe he just can't hear you yet. Oh, maybe he's actually busy. He's doing something else. Maybe he's asleep. Maybe he's tired. He's just taking a nap. He's not hearing you. Maybe that's why your God's not helping you. Verse 28, and they, the priests of Baal, 400 and something odd of them, they cried aloud and cut themselves after their manner with knives and lancelets till the blood gushed out upon them. So they are doing these little sacrifice things. I'm going to cut myself, and that's going to show my devotion, and bleed out, and all these rituals to make it sound amazing. And it's not working. Verse 29, and it came to pass when midday was past, and they prophesied until the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice, that there was neither voice nor any to answer, nor any that regarded. So they spent the whole day. He gave them the entire day to pray to their God, to have him send fire down. They did all the worshiping and the chanting and the cutting and ritualistic stuff they knew how to do, probably went even farther than they thought, to try to get something to happen to prove that they had a real religion and a real God. And it didn't work. None of it worked. So verse 30, and Elijah said unto all the people, come near unto me. And all the people came near unto him. So he's going, it's my turn, basically. Time for me to show you my God. And he repaired the altar of the Lord that was broken down. So this is probably an altar up on this hill that has been there before, but is on disrepair. And he's rebuilt it, basically. An older one that had been broken down, that no one used anymore because it was worshiping the real God, not a fake God. Verse 31, and Elijah took 12 stones, according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, unto whom the word of the Lord came, saying, Israel shall be thy name. So that's kind of reminding him, built up 12 stones to build this altar, basically, to put all this on. Verse 32, and with the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he made a trench about the altar as great as would contain 2 measures of seed. So he built an altar out of stone, not of wood, out of stone. And then he dug a trench around the altar, basically. It's going to contain a lot of seed, is how they're weighing or showing you how deep it is, basically. There's a lot of seed. It's deep, basically. Verse 33, and he put the wood in order and cut the bullock in pieces and laid him on the wood. So he's got the 12 stones, and then he's got wood, and then he put the cut pieces of the bullock on top of that. And there's a big trench dug around this altar. And said here, basically, fill 4 barrels with water and pour it on the burnt sacrifice and on the wood. Now, these people know that fire goes out with wood. If you need to put a fire out, you pour water on it and the fire goes out, basically. So he's not just building an altar. He is dumping 4 barrels of water, probably a barrel. I'm not sure exactly how much a barrel would be back then, but probably a barrel's 5 to 10 gallons, maybe. So 4 of them could be 20 to 40 gallons of water dumped on this. And I don't know if you've ever tried to start a fire after dumping a couple gallons of water on something. It doesn't light very well. That wood is soaked. It's like trying to start a fire after a rainstorm. Your wood is wet. It's not going to burn very well. It's going to take some time to get it to dry and warm up enough to dry. You're going to burn through a lot of starter to get that wood dry enough that it'll take the flame and move. Okay, verse 34, and he said, do it the second time. So fill 4 more barrels and do it again. And they did it the second time. And he said, do it the third time. And they did it the third time. And the water ran about the altar, and he filled the trench also with water. So 3 times, 4 barrels, basically. So 12 barrels of water. So it's probably 100 or more gallons of water that has been dumped on this altar and all the wood and the animal. So it is thoroughly drenched. The wood is soaked through. And the water is right there around the altar on that trench, basically. So he did all of this, basically. Okay, put it all together. Verse 36, and it came to pass at the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice. So they had a time in the day where you go do your evening sacrifices, and this was the time for that sacrifice. So he's preparing for that. That Elijah the prophet came near and said, Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and of Israel, let it be known this day that thou art God in Israel, that I am thy servant, and that I have done all these things at thy word. So God is teaching and talking to Elijah this whole time, telling him, here's what you're going to go do, basically. And it's interesting, he says the God of Abraham, Isaac, and of Israel, which is Jacob, basically. But this is the kingdom of Israel that he is talking to, these people, not Judah, Israel. So he's really pointing out that the Lord God is your God, and he has always been your God, the God of your forefathers and everything. So you need to follow him. So he says, verse 37, hear me, O Lord, hear me, that this people may know that thou art the Lord God, and that thou hast turned their heart back again. He's trying to get these people, we need to teach these people, you are the God, and they need to repent and come back to you, basically. Verse 38, then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt sacrifice and the wood and the stones and the dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench. Now, I don't know if you have started fires or have dealt with like house fires or wildfires or things like that, but you have to understand, it's one thing to burn the sacrifice, the animal's body that's on there. It's one thing to burn the wood, but to consume the stones, that is an intense fire. I don't know exactly what stones it was, but that's that's an intense fire to burn the stones and the dust. Okay, so the ground around the altar was burned too. It burned hot, intense, probably to the point that they're almost making glass out of it, basically, with the dust and things. And it was so hot that it evaporated the water that was in the trench. As it says here, it licked up the water. Basically, it evaporated it. It boiled the water, and the water cooked out. That is an intense fire. That is a really super intense fire. Holy cow. So not just any fire, but a doozy of an intense fire. Verse 39, excuse me. When all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and they said, the Lord, he is the God. The Lord, he is the God. So it was very clear to the people who was the real God. This didn't take long. The priests of Baal, remember, they spent all day trying to get Baal to do something, and he did nothing. And Elijah puts all this together, has people dump all this stuff on it, and then he says one prayer, and it's done. It's happened. It's phenomenal. And it came down. It says the fire fell down. So something came from above down to do this. Could it be just miraculous fire God sent? Yeah, it could. Absolutely could be. Could it be, some people might try to say, oh, it was like an asteroid or other things, but it doesn't say like it destroyed everybody around there, just destroyed where that altar and where the trench was. So it's probably not like a volcanic eruption that spewed a piece out or something like that. This is an intense fire. This is not just lava being shot out of a volcano or a meteorite coming down and hitting, because that would have caused an impact, basically, and there's no sign of an impact. So it's more of a miraculous fire than anything else. Verse 40, and Elijah said unto them, take the prophets of Baal, let not one of them escape. And they took them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon and slew them there. So now they knew the prophets of Baal were fake. They were frauds. They were the Potemkin village. Took them down, and he killed them all, because that's treason in Israel to teach against God. Idolatry was treason. If you go back to the law of Moses, Okay, back in Moses and Joshua's time. Very important. Now, verse 41, and Elijah said unto Ahab, Get thee up, eat and drink, for there is a sound of abundance of rain. And so now the curse is gone. Rain is coming. So the sound of abundance of rain is probably thunderstorms, clouds, lightning and thunder coming basically. Verse 42, so Ahab went up to eat and to drink, and Elijah went up to the top of Carmel, and he cast himself down upon the earth and put his face between his knees. So he gets down in this ball basically. Verse 43, and said to his servant, Go up now, look toward the sea. And he went up and looked and said, There is nothing. And he said, Go again 7 times. So this is Elijah telling his servant to do this. Verse 44, and it came to pass at the 7th time that he said, Behold, there ariseth a little cloud out of the sea like a man's hand. And he said, Go up and say unto Ahab, Prepare thy chariot and get thee down, that the rain stop thee not. So he's looking out over the ocean, and he's saying, There's nothing there yet, nothing there yet. Oh, look, there's clouds starting to billow in. They're building up like a hand. So a big cumulonimbus cloud probably coming in off the ocean. And so he's saying, Go tell Ahab, you need to move before the rains come in, and you can't pass that way. Verse 45, and it came to pass in the meanwhile that the heaven was black with clouds and wind, and there was a great rain, and Ahab rode and went to Jezreel. And the hand of the Lord was on Elijah, and he girded up his loins and ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. Now this is interesting. Something I've learned recently, when it talks about girding up your loins, this is something that's really interesting, because I think we think about that in a more military standpoint of putting on something around your waist to protect your loins, girding them up, protecting them. But what actually it means in this context that we're looking at is they wore robes, okay? They didn't have like pants or shorts or more modern type clothes. They wore robes. So they were long flowing, kind of, everybody wore dresses or robes. We've seen like Arab nations, everybody wears these long flowing robes. Girding up your loins, what that means is you reach down and you grab in between your legs, the bottom of your robes, basically, and you pull them up. So you kind of hitch your robe up by your knees, and you grab that center, you grab the bottom of the robe from the front and the back, and you lift it up, and you tuck it into your belt. So you kind of make yourself some pantaloons out of your robe, basically. So you grab that robe and you pull it forward, you tuck it into your belt to hold it there, and then you can run. Now, why did you do it? It sounds kind of weird, but why do you do this? It's hard to run in robes. Okay, women understand this. Running in a dress is not easy because the material gets in your way, and it makes it hard to run. You can't get a full, girth or stretch of your legs out. It gets in the way, and it binds and makes problems. So this is what they would do. They would grab the bottom of the robe. They would hitch up the robe up to their knees to pull up the slack. They would tuck all that slack into their belt. And when they tucked all that into their belt, you had kind of pantaloons, which meant your legs could move freely without the robe getting in the way. Now you can run in a robe. That's what girding up your loins means. And that's exactly what he did here. Elijah girded up his loins and ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. So Elijah runs really fast. The Lord is helping him. He gets to Jezreel before Ahab does. Let's jump into the next chapter to learn what happens when these two encounter each other in Jezreel.